This is Professional Life Crisis. I'm your host, Amanda. And by now, I'm a damn near professional at having a life crisis. This podcast is here to help you get through those messy, uncertain times riddled with ramen noodles and self-doubt. If you're an ambitious, curious young professional trying to pave your way in the world, it's not as scary as I once thought it was. But I really wish I'd had someone to tell me that. Can we talk about how Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig
didn't get an Oscar nomination?
Yeah, what the fuck is up with that? It's art imitating life or life imitating art. What is it? Yeah. Life imitating art.
I don't know. Everyone had that same take. It's disappointing. It was a great movie. Like it was well made. It had a good message. Like it was funny.
And they completely duped everyone when all of the preview stuff and all of the like PR hype started coming out about the Barbie movie. Literally not one person hinted at the fact that it was like a feminist manifesto. Like, I feel like it was like one of those TikTok videos where a girl is like on screen, she's talking to the camera, she's like doing her lip gloss, and she's like, I love this product so much, it's so great, like it's a new lip stain, whatever, and she's like, okay girls, now that we lost the boys, like it's time to
you know, start the revolution.
Exactly. Yeah. I felt like that was kind of like Barbie movie. It was like disguised as one thing, and then it was just like way deeper than I expected.
The nominations were disappointing, and I say that with I didn't see all the other female like best actresses, so can't compare, but America Ferrera got nominated for the supporting actress, which
and she was great.
Super exciting. But I don't know what came over me. I was like, she's been in like a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I looked up her Wikipedia page and her IMDb, and I was like, shit, she's active. She's been acting and active, and she already like had like a couple Emmys from I don't know if it was Ugly Betty.
Traveling Pants,
no, she did Ugly Betty, and then she did what was that? She did Superstore, which I also been watching that one too, and it is very funny.
I watch that.
It's like it has the energy of like The Office, like Parks and Rec, like where you're kind of filmed like documentary style.
I can't.
I know you don't. I know. As I said it, I'm like, you're the wrong person to talk about this.
It's not my target audience. Yeah, no. I am not the target audience for The Office. I almost am, but like I need a less dry sense of humor. It's too much. It's too uncomfortable. I like cringe. Did you watch? There's a new movie on Netflix called Dumb Money. And it's all about the short squeeze of GameStop back in 2020.
Oh my god, no.
It was so good. America Ferrera was in it.
Oh, was she really?
Yeah.
Wait, yeah, and like, I feel like I've seen the trailer. Yeah. She's in it?
Yeah.
Was it good?
Yeah, it actually was good. It's like all about how this guy, Kevin Gill, I don't forget his name.
Kevin McAllister.
Keith Gill? Whatever. Keith. Kevin. Kevin McAllister. Literally, Home Alone. I think his name's Keith Gill. All right, close enough. And it's all about how he like basically started I don't know if he started the Wall Street Bets thread or if he was just like a very active participant on there. Okay, so we are here to actually talk today about professional life and the life crises that you have had going through your career journey. And I appreciate you coming on. I think this is going to be a great chat, especially because you are going through a transition right now. And I think it's very timely.
Yeah.
Apropos, or whatever they say in French.
Oui.
Yeah, oui, exactly. Oui.
I'm super excited to do this with you. I've been super excited for you and proud of you going on this journey and creating your podcast and being able to do it with you and like with, you know, one of my best friends is so exciting. And you're right.
This is just your campaign to be the co-host.
How am I doing? And to your comment, I am currently going through I just quit my job.
Yeah, like literally
like
last
a week ago.
I know, I'm honestly really glad that we booked this day to talk about this because it's so like fresh in your mind. Yeah. But okay, I know all about you obviously, but everybody else doesn't. So tell us about yourself.
So yeah, you know all about me because we've known each other for like 20 years.
Yeah,
but my name
is Harry.
Yes, thank you. My name is Harry Catalani. Grew up on Long Island.
Not like anybody could tell based on your accent.
Well,
for sure.
Yeah.
And my accent comes out when I'm with you.
Yeah, I will.
And right before, you know what we did? We got coffee and we hung out with my dog.
Yeah, no. So we grew up together. I went to school upstate, and for the past 6.5 years now, I've been working at the same company at Anheuser-Busch, and that has brought me to Missouri, to California, San Francisco, LA, work travel to Florida and like a bunch of other states. So I have been kind of in this whirlwind, it feels like, of professional travel, work travel, professional growth, personal growth by moving to different places, taking on new jobs, doing all this stuff that I feel like if high school me was like, you work at a beer company, I'm like, well, not anymore. But it'd be a really interesting, kind of conversation to have with myself. Yeah, and you have, I think, traveled and lived in the most places due to work out of all of our friends. Yeah. And something I always admired about you is that you would get brought to live in all these different places, like especially in the very beginning, like we had just graduated college. A lot of us moved back to New York and they were like, you're going to Missouri. Very fitting though, as we are going to watch the Kansas City Chiefs game today. That's in Missouri, right? It famously, yes. Yeah, okay, great. Just checking. But yeah, so you were part of this initial rotational program, which brought you to a bunch of different places, and then you were living in SF, LA, like the desert burbs of LA. Yeah, I lived outside Los Angeles. I'm not gonna lie, I lived in Riverside, but that's like where I worked. So. But you actually lived at Emily's apartment on the weekends in Marina Del Rey. Have I told you this? So I lived in Riverside for 8 months. Mm-hmm. I put 14,000 miles on my car driving to LA like almost every weekend to stay at Emily's apartment. You put 14,000 miles on your car in 8 months. In 8 months. Because I kept going into LA or Laguna or like Newport. Like, I kept leaving the desert, you know? Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're in the desert, you kind of just want to leave. That's crazy. Yeah, that is crazy. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's something that I really admire about you and like some of our other friends who have journeyed outside of where we grew up and started their career in another place. And I think you learn a lot about yourself as a person and it causes you to grow a lot. Mm-hmm. And I would love to hear more about that as we get into the conversation. Yeah. But can you tell us a little bit about what brought you to the journey of working at a beer company and working in HR? Like, what was that like? Yeah. For a little bit of context, I've been in HR for my entire career. Mm-hmm. But when I was in college, I had an HR internship my sophomore year. I worked at Boeing for a summer, so I lived outside Seattle. But I wanted to transition. Oh my God, you did. Yeah. They're not doing so well right now. No. Oops. Glad you got out of there. Yeah, well, I guess if the FAA says you can go on a 737 MAX 9 or whatever it is, then you could probably do that. But yeah, so they're having some issues. Back in, I think it was like 2022 or 2021, it was a couple years ago, my mom and I went down to Florida and we flew the MAX 8. And like after we landed, they released a statement that the MAX 8 wasn't safe. And we were like, good thing we made it. Like, okay, and now it's happening again with the MAX 9. Oh God, yeah, no, it's not great for them. Yeah. But anyway, so I didn't love HR at Boeing. It was a really interesting company, but it was one of the older American companies. Like, it was very bureaucratic, and HR there felt very like executional. It felt like being a stereotypical like office like HR manager, and I was like, I don't. That wasn't your brand. I was like, I don't love that. No. So then my sophomore year at a couple internships, I did a consulting internship in New York City and then one consulting internship in Connecticut. And it was like HR consulting. So it was like compensation, evaluations. It was like comp philosophy, coaching, things like that. So it was like still in the realm, but it was in consulting. And so when I was graduating, when we were seniors, I really wanted to go into the consulting world. It was a super competitive year because we graduated in 2017. Yep. And I think that I really wanted to work at Deloitte. And I remember that I was going through the process and I thought it was going well, but they had so many like returned intern offers that there were like so few spots and a lot of... Because that's how those summer programs work. It's like as long as you don't majorly fuck up, they give you an offer at the end of the summer, everything's fine and dandy, happy, everybody's good. And it didn't work out. So I didn't get that job. I wasn't getting interviews at other places. And you know me, I was like, oh my God, it's October and I don't have a job.
Everyone has a job offer signed.
Job.
Isn't that crazy when you think back to it that we had job offers signed in October to start like the next October? It's it's crazy how far in advance that happens.
And also how different the recruitment world is today, which we can talk about later because I was doing a little bit of that recently.
Oh, I'd love to hear about
that. I remember very distinctly that it was like 11:30 p.m. at night, and I'm sad, Harry, at this moment. And I'm drinking a bottle of wine on my bed, like in our off-campus house, just applying for jobs. And I see on LinkedIn, Anheuser-Busch People Trainee Program, which is like kind of like their version of a rotational program of sorts. And
like intro HR.
Yeah, like learn everything, right? And I saw it and drinking a little bit, I was like, I like Bud Light. So I was like, cool. Send in an application, immediately get an email that it was like, okay, take a culture fit test. I took the culture fit test. And then at like 1 a.m., I get an email from the lead recruiter being like, hey, like, congratulations. Like, we're setting you up with the first round interview. Like, you're a little, like, we're going to move really quickly.
Not even like an hour and a half, 2 hours later?
Right.
Oh my God.
God bless this woman who was, full swing recruitment season. It's super late and she's like banging out emails. And she's like, I have an interview for you tomorrow at 9 a.m. So, and I'm like, cool.
Sorry, this doesn't happen. That's not it. Okay, yeah.
And so, because it had been posted and like Cornell's schedule was like towards the end of when their cycle was. So she's like, I need you to get in the door like really quickly, do an interview. I show up. It went well. And then that afternoon by like noon, she goes, hey, congratulations. Like, we have a final round interview in New York City in like 4 days. Huh. Can you make it work? We will get you a ticket, like a bus ticket. And I was like, sure. I go down, and the thing about Anheuser-Busch is that they do panel interviews. So it's you, 5 other candidates, and then like 5 or 6 executives, and then 45 minutes, and it's like ping pong. And so they'll ask one person questions. Well, what do you think of their answer? Yada, yada, yada.
Wait. They have multiple candidates in the room interviewing for the same position?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I have never heard of a panel interview like that.
Yeah,
no.
It's bananas.
From my experience, a panel interview is a bunch of different execs, people on the team, all asking you questions. There aren't multiple candidates.
There were multiple candidates.
This is wild. How does that feel?
It was very stressful, and it's a really weird dynamic because, like, what's your company culture? Like, what are you looking for? Do you want the candidates to feed off each other? Do you want, like, them to stand out? But how do you do it in an appropriate kind of, like, professional sense without steamrolling and not actually adding value, right? So
you don't want to be the person on The Bachelor who's like, oh, hi, I'm sorry. Like, I just wanted to steal him for the 3rd time tonight. So, like, could I just, like, get in here and make my point again? You don't want to be
the pilot's like, no. Like, you're not getting Rose, and we knew that 40 minutes ago.
Yeah, you gotta get the balance right. Okay, yeah, great.
Wow,
okay. So it's like, how well do you play with others?
Right. And you know me, I love to talk.
Yeah.
And it's 45 minutes. We do our quick intros, and then we're getting asked questions. I don't get asked a question for 30 minutes.
Whoa.
And I'm like, I had the worst bus trip of my life to get here.
What, was someone eating tuna next to you or something?
It was supposed to take 5.5 hours to get from Ithaca, New York to New York City. It took 9, so I'm late and I'm in a mood.
Yeah.
And now I'm there the next morning. I'm not getting questions, and I'm getting, like, annoyed. And I get asked a question, the one question I get asked, which was, like, a consulting-based question, and I responded, with my answer.
Was it, like, a case interview kind of a thing?
So the question, it was a case interview, but it wasn't framed as one. And the question was essentially, like, Bud Light sales in St. Louis are 90% of the market, and in New York City, it's 5% of the market. That's a problem. Fix it. And I go, okay, well, I don't know that I agree with the premise of the question. I was like, I grew up in New York on Long Island, and I was like, 5% of the market in Manhattan could be crazy numbers. I was like, it's most of our city, yada, yada. And St. Louis is the home of Bud Light. Should it be 90 or should it be 95? And I go, I think we should be seeing what we're doing right in this city, or like what our competitors are at. And the VP of HR, he goes, oh, well, no, like the Bud Light share in St. Louis is growing, and in New York it's going down. And again, I've been peeved. And I go, okay, that's an entirely different question.
The Harry comes out.
And so, and so I was like, oh shit. And I was like, okay, so finish it. I'm on the bus home, and I'm like, oh my God. And then 2 days later, I got an offer. And I was like, which at the time and the company culture was very competitive. It was, we want the grittiest folks that are smart and can like, build whatever kind of influence, in a room. And that has since changed. I've seen our interview practices, or not ours, I don't work there anymore, but I've seen that change based on like where the company culture is. Like what kind of talent are you looking to identify based on what kind of environment you're trying to foster. Then it was competitive, gritty, we got to win back market share, yada, yada, yada. And it's evolved since then. So the questions are a bit different. Now? So I think it's more collaborative.
Okay.
And I think that's a broader shift that we've seen in the CPG industry as, consumers evolve. If there's anything that we learned from COVID was that consumer insights are perishable. And in the past, where you would have these years-long consumer trends, we've seen change in the span of a couple months.
Oh, yeah. It's like cycles turn over so much faster as a result of COVID. And
that's a byproduct of so many different things, whether it's trends or, different environments and things like that. So it's how can we adapt to that? And it's the answer that was decided was being more collaborative, being more, open to ideas and things like that, which is great. I think it's different, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it's definitely a shift in how we conducted interviews and things like that. I also need to preference, I don't speak for Anheuser-Busch.
Yeah. Nothing that
Caveat,
you say represents the views of the company.
Yeah.
Of course.
Nice.
So we've heard a little bit about your journey from thinking that you might want to go into consulting to like rogue applying to this job at AB and having a little bit of a rocky experience getting to the job offer. But you wound up taking it. You wound up joining.
We did it, Joe.
Yeah, we did it, Joe. Should we shake on it? We did it, Joe. Still one of my favorite memes of all time.
Amazing.
And so for someone who doesn't know what being in HR is or doesn't know what an HR business partner is, can you explain to someone like they're 5 years old, like what is that job?
Yeah, so part-time therapist, part-time accountant, mediator. I think in my experience at the company that I worked at, there's a view of strategic people business partners, which felt different than, the internship I mentioned at Boeing. It felt very transactional. Whereas in the roles that I've had over the past couple of years, I've felt like I had a voice and a seat at the table, not just on people related things like engagement or benefits, but more so how can we develop talent? How can we build a pipeline for critical roles that ultimately move the business forward? Because in corporate America, that should usually be the first thing is how are we kind of growing, our business? In what way is this increasing sales? Right.
That's really interesting. I think most people have a very narrow view of what HR does. And
I hate it.
Quite honestly, like a negative view. Because most people don't have great experiences with like the HR lady, But it seems like it's way more strategic and way more all-encompassing. Do you think that's a result of being is that the business partner part of the role, or is that just like all HR roles are just deeper than what we see on the surface?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that there's the thing that always kind of bugged me the most was when like, oh, HR is telling me to do this, or oh, this is HR. It's like, first of all, you know my name. We worked together for 6.5 years. But I think there has been a shift in the view of HR and the exposure that as a department we have is always going to be greater than other kinds of areas because we're seeing every aspect of the business. And so if you are enabling a structure or a culture or like a strategic business partner type role to feed into that kind of inherent piece of the roles and responsibilities, you can get a lot out of that team just from sheer perspective. And that's a perspective, that's like the scope that has always existed, but hasn't necessarily been leveraged. And has been one of my favorite things about, working at Anheuser-Busch is that it's built into our practices, our cycles and things like that, where it is a voice to have at the table, really kind of enable the idea that the people and the talent are a really great strength.
If someone were interviewing for an HR position, Are there any questions that you could think of that they should be asking in an interview to identify whether it's one of these more strategic HR roles or if it's just like, just handle the employee complaints kind of roles?
Yeah, I think asking about the critical projects that are associated with this role, right? So if it's ensuring that we finish our people cycle and benefits enrollment, like execution of the engagement plan and things like that, those are important things. Those are critical and key things. But are they strategic? Are they actually tied to other aspects of the business that are less traditionally HR associated with? So are some key projects working on how the org is designed in a way to really allow for synergies and ways of working, and essentially be more efficient and effective in their jobs if you're supporting sales and marketing and yada, yada, yada.
Right. So you kind of want to find out how cross-functional this role is or is seen as currently at the company.
Yeah, it would be that. And then what is the general routine with the client group that you're supporting? How often are those meetings and one-to-ones? If it's like, in the leadership call once a month, that isn't the level of exposure that you should have in order to drive a degree of change that is going to be beneficial. Still doing important things, and it's not to diminish that. But if you're a part of the leadership team, you're on the monthly, the weekly, but then there's also these scheduled one-to-ones with the leaders to identify key areas of opportunity, right? That's important.
Yeah,
because that shows that you have a seat at the table.
Right. And you're seen as having value in that way.
And your positional authority as well. Yeah.
I think that also could be a good question to ask if you have anybody in your network that works at the company in HR. These are questions you could ask, like your kind of like peer mentor kind of person, to be like, hey, in your day-to-day, are you actually involved in these cross-functional meetings or decisions? Like, do you actually feel like you have a strategic seat at the table? Or do you feel like you're like way more just like operational to handle HR type of tasks? Yeah, I think that's really good because I think that's something that's been pretty unique and really great about your role. And I don't know that every HR role is like that. But also, like, this conversation is really interesting for me because I don't work in HR. So it's interesting to hear it from someone who does.
Yeah.
So we're going to start to talk a little bit about your professional life crisis.
Which one?
Yeah, exactly.
Which year?
Yeah,
which era?
Right. And like, okay, I think a lot of people feel like that. Which era? So what have some of the toughest obstacles been for you in your career?
I think there's obviously been a couple. I think personal, we kind of alluded to before, the roles that I've had. I lived in St. Louis, Missouri. I lived in Riverside, California. I lived in San Francisco. And I finally moved back to New York City and have been here for the past 2.5 years. And for me, there's a personal and a professional growth aspect.
Yeah.
The personal aspect, moving to a city where I don't know anybody. I had the benefit and the luxury and the privilege of being in a rotational program, being with a cohort of like-minded 22-year-olds who are in the same situation and kind of figuring it out. How does rent work in St. Louis? Yeah.
Let me tell you, it's freaking cheap.
It's so cheap.
The biggest apartment for $800 a month.
It was $750.
Stop!
If we have okay, we're going to take it aside. If we had a chart of the square footage of my apartments and the amount of rent that I've spent, they would go in opposite directions.
It's inverse. Totally.
Inverse.
Yeah.
And it's miserable. And the amount of amenities, who is she?
Yeah. Yeah, that apartment was amazing.
It was huge.
That was probably worth living in St. Louis, just that one thing.
It had the single thing that I only ever want in any place I ever live, and living in New York City, I don't have it now. I don't know when I'm going to have it. And it's an in-unit washer and dryer. It's so
critical for mental health.
Yeah. It's in our building now, and then in San Francisco, I had to go to a laundromat, which is...
That's yeah. You had a cool apartment there, too.
The San Francisco, bay windows. It was on, where was I? Lower Pacific Heights, great view of the city. It was actually a very nice apartment. Yeah. Just a walkout.
All I remember about that apartment is that we watched that octopus documentary on Netflix a couple of years ago.
Oh, yeah. That was after we did your Princess Diaries tour.
Oh, yes, around the city. And you showed me the house where they, filmed the school. Oh, that was so fun. Yeah. Okay, so...
I felt, from a personal standpoint, I think being open and putting myself in that space while having a really great support network as well too. Like I don't want to discount having a really great organization that had good reload policies, a cohort of coworkers that were going through the same thing, and then a great group of friends and family back in New York, right? That were always very supportive of just doing something
yeah, we
new.
were.
But I think I grew a lot. I think I learned a lot about myself and kind of what it's like to live in a different city, what it's like to kind of figure out how to make new friend groups and things like that. So that's a personal sense. In a professional kind of obstacle, when I moved to Riverside, I was a people business partner, like an HR manager for one of our distribution centers. So think every Budweiser that was sold between LA and Palm Springs was delivered by one of the drivers, sold by a sales rep, merchandise by a merchandiser at the supermarkets and things like that. And I was the people person. So I supported the entire site as the only point of contact from an HR perspective. And I was responsible for 240 employees. I sat on the leadership team.
That is a lot to do as like a 25, 26
I was 23.
20?
When I first moved to California, I was 23, about to turn 24.
Responsible for 240 employees.
240 employees, and
that's a lot of responsibility.
It was a trial by fire type of a experience where I sat on the leadership team and I had positional authority where whatever I said, however I reacted in meetings, came from a place of a leader of this branch is thinking X, right? In some capacity. And I didn't know how to manage people. I love talking, I love yada, 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 but it's like I didn't know what it meant to have that carry weight. And it bit me in the ass a couple times, where it's like I famously, no poker face.
Yeah, everything
you know
that's
what
in
I'm
your head
thinking.
is on your mind. Yeah, it's on your face.
Heart on my sleeve, I'm an open book.
Yeah.
But that's not always appropriate, right?
Especially when you've been endowed with this like leadership aura and you're not ready for it.
And I struggled big time. That transition in California early on was an issue for me personally and an issue for me professionally, and was something that I had to learn quickly. And that probably taught me a lot. It's probably one of the most like critical career experiences that I've had, that I managed to come out of, and I came out of it in a good way.
How did you like work through that?
I had, open conversations with my boss and was like, I don't know what I don't know. And I'm uncomfortable with that and I need your help, which I didn't do for like a couple months because I was embarrassed. I was given this opportunity to grow and it was a stretch, and I was like, oh no. And I didn't want to be vulnerable in that way. Until my boss was like, what's going on? And I was like, well,
let me
tell you.
Yeah. I know you can want to put on this face that you have it under control and that you are like punching above your weight. But I think actually opening up and being vulnerable with your boss that you are still learning and growing about some things actually does show a lot of maturity, even though it's like fucking hard.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think part of my mantra as an HR professional is it was a disservice to myself and my growth, to my boss and the amount of time that she had to dedicate to me, and my client group of I was flailing a little bit, right? And if I'm not being open, it's not that I wasn't open to like learning, right? But I didn't know how to ask the right questions. Yeah. That's a disservice to my client group. And that is where I think people are like, my HR manager doesn't know what he's doing, or what you're now just executing tasks.
Damaged
right.
Their perception of you.
Yeah. I think early on, and then I kind of my feet under me and learn what I had to learn. And then 8 months later I got asked to take the same job up in San Francisco for a branch up there that didn't have the support network of peers that were at similar branches scattered across Los Angeles and San Diego. This was the only branch in Northern California. My boss was like, you figured it out. It took some time, but I trust you. Go to Oakland. Yeah, we have a business opportunity. It needs someone to figure out how to kind of right the ship a little bit, right?
I want to go back for a second because I think there's a big theme around young people taking on really ambitious roles and feeling like it's a little bit of a stretch. Yeah. If you were giving advice to someone younger who were going through that kind of transition now, what would you tell them to help them develop those leadership skills? And maybe it's even more than skills. It's like a leadership awareness about themselves.
Yeah. I think where I would give advice would be digging into what opportunity that you are seeking out, truly understanding what it's going to entail. And so that is doing informational interviews with folks who have had that job, who have that job in a somewhat different capacity. I did that a little bit, but probably not as much as I should have, where I think I would have went in with a bit more eyes wide open versus I'm hot shit, I know what I'm doing.
So you should have like maybe gained a little more perspective about what the role was going to entail, what the valuable like traits and skills would have been to go into that next level. It
felt like an expectations game that I set myself up for failure, in the sense of like, oh, like I got this, and then I didn't, and then I got whiplash.
It's so easy to think that you're hot shit when you're 23. I thought it was hot shit too.
But I think if I was like, oh, this is going to be more of a stretch, right, or more of a, challenge me in different ways, I think it would have been quicker for me to lean into the network of professional relationships that I developed when I lived in St. Louis in our headquarters, of going to them and asking if they owned a certain process, for support, for help earlier on than I know what I'm doing, And I think that was a bit of the whiplash where I was like, I already had this network and I just haven't been leveraging it because I thought I knew what I was going to be doing. Yeah. And then I got embarrassed, and then I was like, okay, I need to figure it out. Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe to avoid the embarrassment, we can like get a little bit more in your humble mindset. Yep. Think about what people who have been through these similar experiences can offer you. And I think advice is like something you don't always have to implement, but it's good to just hear what other people have to say and you take what you think is valuable.
Yeah, and I think for corporate CPG rotational programs, it's super common to see these trainees or these, rotational kids, right, kind of go through that same experience. That is valuable. I did learn a lot from it. And yes, I was embarrassed, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because if I wasn't embarrassed, then I would have got fired. And then I'm like, what happened? You know what I mean?
Right. So the embarrassment actually was like a signal to yourself that I need to be, all right, let me reflect. Let me like
performance reviews are coming up. I don't want to be like an underperformer. I think that's where like a bit of hubris can come in for, these kids that are in rotational programs that think that they're hot shit. And usually they are, but it's that, where can you humble yourself a little bit? You don't know everything. No. I don't know everything now.
I think that's really good advice for anybody who is starting out and in an opportunity where they have to level up and kind of facing some challenges with doing that. So thanks for that advice. Let's talk a little bit about the story of your professional life crisis. So I'm curious to hear a little bit about what your most recent or most profound crisis was. So.
Yeah, I think professional life crises every 4 months, which is super exciting.
Relatable.
And I think that comes from a place of like our friends, my network, everyone. It feels like we're doing well, like we're successful, like we're taking on new challenges. And throughout my career, it's, am I doing what is best for my longest career, right? For that not 1 year goal, but that 30-year goal. Yeah. And should I be doing this? Do I always want to be in beer? Do I want to be in HR? Do I want to go in the business? And so that's something that I've battled for 6.5 years. Most recently, it was a little bit different, and I think a little bit more existential, where I think I've solved I like being in HR. Is it a function that I'm like super passionate about building engagement plans and things like that? Like, not necessarily, but I think if I am bringing the right things to the table, that as a function, I think I can operate very well in. And the more that you move up in any organization, you're going to start managing people. And that in and of itself becomes like a majority of your job is managing a team.
Managing people.
And it doesn't matter what function it is. You need functional skills, right? But it's how do you lead? How do you coach? And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not bad at HR.
I think people do get a certain amount of satisfaction, even if it's not like their life's calling, but from being good at something. Like to be good at your job can give you satisfaction, even if it's not the be all end all of like your interests.
I feel like it spoke volumes about my broader interest in the company. Like, I work at this company that makes beer and brings people together to celebrate special moments and yada 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 and sports. And for me, that was really important in finding a job, because at the end of the day, if I knew I wanted to be in HR but I hated the company or I hated the culture, I would have left years ago.
Yeah.
If I really love the company and culture and I got a job, let's say like in sales, but I wanted to go into HR, it's a lot easier to make that career pivot when you're in the door and have proven your basic capabilities. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it sounds like you developed an enjoyment and a satisfaction in working in HR over time, which I think is a nice thing to point out, because I think that I've developed more of my passions over time from doing things and learning that there are things that I like. I didn't just like inherently come out of the womb just knowing everything that I was going to be passionate about in the course of my life. So you developed this kind of interest or passion for HR from sort of being good at it, succeeding. And you also mentioned something too about the product and that you felt excited about the product that your company produces. How important do you think that is in looking for another job? Like, do you think it's important to be passionate about the product that the company makes?
100%. I think there's definitely an argument to be made of having a job to have a job. I think American culture is, whether right or wrong, is you're devoting your life to work. Is that perfect? No. But if that's what we're doing, why would we be working in X job to get paid if it's like you're going to be miserable doing it? Not that there's anything, like, people have different lives and you work because you need a paycheck, and so not everyone has as many privileges or so I definitely understand that. But if you're having the opportunity and you're able to have the conversation, lean that way, because as you grow and you build your career, other things come with it as well too. So might as well just be passionate about whatever product. That's a very CPG mindset. I can't speak to consulting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, that's a loaded wheelhouse topic. Yeah, I think part of the reason that I was so dissatisfied with my career in consulting is because I felt like there was no product. There, like, nothing that I worked on ever felt real or tangible, and so that is a big part of why I was never satisfied, actually. Okay. And maybe other people can make the connection a little bit better than I could about, I'm consulting for a company that makes beer, so therefore I am affecting the beer industry. Maybe that's how they feel, but I just felt like my end result was PowerPoints.
Where you value satisfaction and the work that you do, it doesn't match with that industry, and that's fine, and you recognize that and you moved on, right? And for me, I like the CPG industry. I like working for an organization that has a product that in some capacity is celebratory. It's fun. Ooh, right?
Yeah, work can be fun, and the product that you work on can be fun. I am really curious to lean into that conversation because out of all of our friends, you were the one who was at your first job, first career, the longest. And so I wonder how those last 8 months shaped up for you. Like, what were the questions that were going through your head? Yeah.
It no longer became what is my next job? What's my next role? What is my next opportunity? It became more of I've been at this company for 6.5 years. What do the next 6.5 years look like? What is the next chapter of my career? Do I continue the path that has been laid out for me and grow and learn? And my big thing, and the thing that kept me at Anheuser-Busch for so long, and that I'm forever grateful for, was that I continued to learn and develop in every role and opportunity that I had.
That's great.
That was
not everybody can say that for a job for more than 5-6 years.
Yeah, and I think that was still going to be something that would have been available to me in the career that was being mapped out for me and kind of what that growth was going to look like. But my life, I think, has changed a lot. I finally moved back to New York City.
Yeah, you did.
I'm back. I love it. I always wanted to be here. I always wanted to be back in New York by Long Island with my family, my friends, and I could grow and develop my career at AB by staying in New York City. With somewhat limited, there were definitely options. It's not to say that there weren't, but it's a global company. It's huge. There were conversations. Do I want to go back in the field and go to a brewery? Do I want to go to St. Louis? Absolutely not. Great barbecue, really cool arch. And for me, it was when I look at my career and my ambitions and how I want to grow and how I want to develop, right? And I want to be a leader for an organization in my career, what's going to set me up the best? Is it staying in CPG and staying in beer and being that guy?
Right.
Or is it doing something different? And that was the conversation at a super high level that I had. And I put in my 2 weeks, and I have a new opportunity coming up that's in the tech space. So
yeah.
So super excited. It's a company that I'm excited to work for.
So you
yeah.
had this conversation with yourself where you were asking questions like, am I still going to learn and grow at this company? Which to some extent the answer was yes. But also maybe there was an element of wanting to know what else was out there and learning and growing your skill set in a different industry.
Yeah, I made this comment to a few people. I only ever worked at Anheuser-Busch, which people were surprised about. I'm like, I was a trainee kid, right? And I've never quit a job. That is a career experience that I've never had.
True. It is an experience and a skill that, you know, it's a little bit scary, but...
Oh, God, no. I had awful anxiety for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you finally did it and then it went well. So, looking back on your own career journey, what advice would you give to young people who may be questioning their path and figuring out their own professional life crisis?
Yeah, I think something that I hear a lot from, like, out of college, if you're in a program, or just, you know, young, ambitious professional, of what's my next step? And asking that really, really early on.
And with a lot of anxiety.
A lot of anxiety.
What do I do next?
You got promoted a week ago, and now you're like,
now what?
What am I doing next?
Yeah.
And I think from that perspective, it is very much a do your role and do it well, and expect a minimum of probably a year in a job, probably longer, to go through more than one cycle of whatever your roles and responsibilities are to deliver results, right? How are you moving the business forward? And then can start thinking about what your next step is going to be. And kind of the next piece of advice is folks that are thinking about their career, I think, come from a place of, well, what's my next step? You tell me. And I think...
Like looking to the company to
looking
give
to
them
the
that information.
Company, yes. And I think everyone needs to have more ownership in their career, because at the end of the day, a person's career is going to be unique to them. And so a really good analogy that I've used is like rock climbing, which I know you just did in Colorado.
I did, yeah, with Catherine.
And for some folks, that career that they know they want is going to be climbing Mount Everest. And that's the ambition, that's the goal. They think they're going to find satisfaction that way. And so they're looking for a, how do I do that without thinking
like
about, right, with the little playbook. For other people, the rock climbing is, you know, in a gym, and it's like you go up and you come back down, you go up and you come back down, and you're getting satisfaction there. And for other folks, it's doing the lateral rock climbing walls where I just want to kind of do this. And the satisfaction that they're feeling is the same. The accomplishments are different, the experiences are different, but if you can view your career in a rock climbing type analogy of being okay with doing different types of things, then that allows you to start to think about what experiences you should be getting to wherever you want to go next.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it is really important also to get to know yourself about what gives you satisfaction. And if it's climbing straight up the ladder, you know, I'm like, okay, I want to be the CEO of this company. Like, you got the ladder, you go straight up. Or if it's more like, I enjoy my function and I want to do that across lots of different companies. I want to have lots of different experiences. I want like a broader view of the world and of how companies function. That's a completely different journey, but those both could give you the same amount of satisfaction, like you said.
Yeah, and true to 1995 millennial, the other analogy is the Pokemon analogy.
I love this. Pokemon. Tell me more.
It's career experiences are going to be valuable, and you should try to catch them all.
Love it.
The Nintendo's going to be, or Pokemon, whichever company. Pokemon.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, you can't use this. Copyright.
Don't sue us.
It's getting as many career experiences that can be functional or can be professional. It can be working in an HR function is one experience. Working in a sales function is another experience. If you're an HR professional like I am, there's being an HR business partner, being an HR manager, and being kind of that main point of contact for employees. Or you can be working in a COE. You're a corporate recruiter. Or you work on the benefits and like compensation team. These are all different experiences, different Pokemon that you want to collect and have, because ultimately when you are going against, whatever obstacle, gym leader, to continue with the analogy that we're really stretching out, when you're going against those obstacles, you're going to use different experiences that you've collected that are going to be the most relevant to whatever you're being faced with. You're not going to use a water Pokemon for a grass type gym leader. That's silly goose energy.
Right.
But, for me, and, kind of what we talked about before in, my career, I've only ever worked in beer. I've only ever worked in CPG, and I've never quit a job. So
you only had one Pokemon up until now.
I only had one Pokemon, and it was Squirtle, our favorite one. I only ever had, one, Pokemon, right? Or one kind of broader type of experience that, would set me up really well in my career and could definitely be used to, have responses or, actions for different obstacles. But it is a more narrow perspective.
Yeah.
I wanted to diversify. I wanted a different career experience for my resume, my professional perspective broadens.
Yeah. I heard a great analogy from someone I used to work with back in consulting. She's lovely. And she said, one of the things on my career bucket list is XYZ. I think she said, one of the things on my career bucket list is to work for a mission-driven company. One of my things on my bucket list is to be like VP level at a company. One of the things on my bucket list is to work for a early stage startup and to really build something. Yeah. And I was like, wait, you have a whole bucket list of like different experiences and you're not just thinking about your career like, oh, this is my dream job and I got to go straight up there. And that really changed my perspective because I realized that there is value in lots of different types of experiences, just like the Pokemon analogy.
Yeah. Managing an employee, managing a big team, owning a P&L for a business. And if you're thinking about your career in these experiences versus a specific role, and there's nothing wrong with thinking about it of I want to be this job. How can I get the experiences that will then make me best suited for that job? Yeah. And it could be a whole bunch of different things. And that allows you to build your own playbook. It allows you to go better prepared to speaking with your manager or your HR professional and saying, this is the role that I want. And these are the experiences I think I need to have in order to best prepare myself to do that. How do we go about that? Yeah. If I got that from an employee as an HR manager.
That's super mature.
It's super mature. You're thinking about it critically, professionally, and I can now, instead of having 1,000 follow-up questions of, well, what are you really trying to do? Why do you really want this role? I can say, here are the resources that we have available to start to get you these experiences.
Yeah, in the role that you're already in.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I think like leveraging your current role to learn and grow into the next role that you want is a great way to get that learning and to demonstrate to leadership that you are ready for that next thing.
When I was living in California and working in the distribution operation, I knew that a career experience I wanted to have was to support executive VP level folks at the organization. How can I build my executive presence in that way? And that was a conversation I had with my boss. I got moved to New York City for my next role and supported the head of our category strategy team and was able to learn how to do that. And how to have those conversations with senior leadership versus, my local team or my sales reps or whatever. It was different.
That's great. Okay, are you ready for the lightning round questions?
Always.
Okay, let's fucking go.
Cool.
You can use 3 adjectives to describe yourself at the beginning of your career. What would they be?
Ambitious, social.
True.
Not humble. Which was a problem.
Egotistical maniac over here.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. We've all been there.
Yeah.
What has taught you more, your failures or your successes?
Definitely my failures has taught me more. Successes are more gratifying, but failures, it's always important when you fail or when something doesn't go as planned to go back and to understand why. Like, do a 5 why now. Like, why did this go wrong? What happened, right? And I think for me, that allowed me to understand where there was a gap in my skill set, my approach, and how can I refine it for similar issues, obstacles in the future. And that taught me the most. Successes are fun, though.
Successes are fun.
Yeah.
It's really uncomfortable. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I fucking hate reflecting on when things don't go well.
Yeah.
It's just, like, not fun. It's uncomfortable. You have to face some things about yourself, and, like, I want to think I'm perfect, but of course I'm not.
And to tell yourself that you didn't do well.
Yeah. It's like, uncomfy.
Yeah.
Hashtag uncomfy.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Passion or paycheck?
So, based on the answers I gave earlier, the answer is passion. I think it's so important to work for a company, an organization, or like what gives me joy, right? That you're passionate about, that you can get behind and say, I work for this product or I work for this organization that has this mission-driven approach, whatever it is. I think that's so important. With that being said, I do not compromise when it comes to paycheck as well.
Right.
Because I know the value that I can bring, and also I am in the air more than most of our friends, flying somewhere, and that's expensive.
It is. And you live in New York City, which is also expensive.
Right. But I think passion makes it more enjoyable. It makes it easier. It makes the time go by. And I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like what you might be saying is holding constant for paycheck.
Right.
Then we choose passion.
Right.
I vibe with that. I think that it does help you pass the time. It's way more fun. It's way more gratifying to do something that you actually care about. Love it.
Love it.
Thanks for coming on, Harry. This has been really fun.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And you've shared some really important insights, I think, for young people who are going through those periods where they have to level up, and it's like really fucking hard. It's not always easy. That growth is not always comfortable. And I think you've shared some really great stories about how you were able to level up. So how can people find you?
Yeah, so folks can find me on LinkedIn, Harry Catalani, as Italian as it sounds. I didn't say where my next opportunity is going to be, so if you want to follow that career journey,
you can find out.
Can find out there, and then Instagram at Harry Catalani.
Love it.
So same brand.
Very on brand.
No, but I had a blast. Thank
Me too.
you. Yeah.
Me too. This was great.